My parents called me a financial burden at Christmas. They didn't know the bank had already chosen a side. My name is Claire Whitman, and until that Christmas night, I thought I understood exactly where I stood in my family. The house was dressed for the holidays, gold ribbon wrapped around the banister, cinnamon candles burning low. The dining table set like something out of a magazine. Everyone was there. My parents, my aunt and uncle. Cousins I only saw once a year. Laughter floated easily, but it felt rehearsed, like a performance I'd seen too many times. We were halfway through dinner when my mother set her fork down and sighed. Not a tired sigh, a deliberate one. The kind meant to draw attention. You know, she said, glancing at my father before looking straight at me. We've carried a lot of financial weight over the years. My stomach tightened. My father nodded, cutting in smoothly. Claire has always been a financial burden. We've helped as much as we could. The word landed hard, burden. No one interrupted. No one defended me. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. One cousin stared down at her plate. Another nodded, like this explanation made sense. I felt every eye turn toward me, waiting maybe for tears, maybe for an argument, maybe for an apology. But I didn't give them any of that. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even look surprised. I simply folded my hands in my lap and stayed quiet. Because what none of them knew what they were about to learn was that this wasn't a family dinner anymore. It was a trial. And I already knew what the bank knew. I wasn't always labeled a burden. At least, not out loud. Growing up, I learned early that in my family, value was measured in visibility. If your success could be displayed, discussed, or admired by others, it counted. If it was quiet, private, or still in progress, it didn't exist. I was the quiet one. I did well in school, but I wasn't flashy about it. I worked through college, paid my own rent, and avoided asking my parents for help whenever I could. Not because I was proud, but because I didn't want to owe anyone explanations. My parents helped when it suited them, then remembered it forever. Every holiday came with reminders. We paid for this. We covered that. You wouldn't have managed without us. I learned to nod. To say thank you. To stay small. My younger cousin, on the other hand, was praised endlessly for announcing promotions that came and went. My aunt loved to brag. My parents loved the noise. I never made noise. I built my life quietly, step by step, believing that independence would eventually speak for itself. It didn't. Silence, I discovered, makes people uncomfortable. When you don't overshare, they start filling in the gaps for you. When you don't ask for help, they assume you're barely surviving. When you don't explain your choices, they rewrite your story for you. To them, my calm meant struggle. My privacy meant failure. I stopped correcting them years ago. Not because they were right, but because every explanation turned into a debate, and every debate ended the same way, with me feeling smaller and them feeling justified. So I let them believe it. I let them think I was floating, dependent, uncertain. What they never asked and what I never offered was what my life actually looked like behind closed doors. They never asked who I worked with, what contracts I signed, or whose names were attached to mine on paper. They just decided. By the time my parents finally said the word burden out loud, it wasn't new. It was simply the story they'd been telling themselves for years. Once the word burden was spoken, the room didn't rush to correct it. Instead, it settled heavy and permanent, like everyone had been waiting for permission to agree. My mother straightened in her chair, emboldened. "We're not saying this to be cruel," she added quickly, as if that softened anything. "But we've supported Claire financially for a long time. College, emergencies, help here and there, it adds up." My father nodded again, tapping his glass with his fork. "We just want honesty in this family. At some point, responsibility has to kick in for the Zaste." "But why?" I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I kept my eyes on my plate. Then my aunt leaned forward, folding her napkin. "You know," she said gently, in the tone people use when they think they're being helpful, "parents can't carry their children forever." A few heads nodded. Someone murmured, "That's true." No one asked me a single question. Not how I was doing. Not what I'd been working on. Not whether their version of my life was accurate. They spoke about me, not to me. The table felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. My cousin avoided my eyes. Another took a long sip of wine like she didn't want to be involved. My mother's voice kept going, listing sacrifices, reminding the room how much they'd given. Every sentence erased another piece of me. I noticed how carefully they avoided specifics. No dates. No numbers. Just a general sense of long-term disappointment framed as concern. It was easier that way. I sat there, hands folded, listening to my life be summarized without my input. I could feel the moment stretching, waiting for me to break the silence, to cry, to argue, to explain myself. I didn't. Because I realized something then. This wasn't about money. It was about control. About who got to define me. And for the first time in my life, I decided I wasn't going to stop them, not yet. The silence that followed felt deliberate, like they were giving me one last chance to redeem myself. That's when my phone rang. The sound cut cleanly through the tension, sharp, out of place. Every head turned toward me at once. My mother frowned, clearly annoyed. "Really, Claire?" she said. "During dinner?" I glanced at the screen. A number I recognized immediately. I stood up without apologizing. "I need to take this." My father scoffed. "If it's another problem, maybe it can wait." I stepped into the hallway anyway, the hum of conversation resuming behind me. I answered quietly. "This is Claire." "Miss Whitman," the voice on the other end said, calm and professional. "This is Northbridge Bank. We need to confirm a few details regarding your accounts and associated guarantees." "I understand," I replied. There was a pause. "We require your verbal confirmation before proceeding." "Yes," I said. "That's fine. No panic. No explanation. Just certainty." When I returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. My mother studied my face, searching for signs of embarrassment or distress. "Everything okay?" she asked a little too quickly. "Yes," I said, sitting back down. "Just the bank." That single word changed everything. My father stiffened. My aunt raised her eyebrows. Someone let out a small, nervous laugh. "The bank?" my mother repeated. "About what?" I reached for my water and took a slow sip. "Just routine confirmation." No one believed that. I could feel the questions building, the unease spreading. The narrative they'd been so comfortable with, me struggling, me depending, me failing, suddenly had a crack in it. And for the first time that night, they weren't looking at me with pity. They were looking at me with uncertainty. I didn't plan the reveal. I didn't rehearse it. It arrived on its own, dressed as paperwork and protocol. My phone rang again 10 minutes later. This time I didn't excuse myself. I looked at the screen, then at the table. "I need to take this," I said calmly. Not asking. Informing. My mother opened her mouth to object, then stopped. Something in my tone made her hesitate. I answered. "Yes. Miss Whitman," the representative said, louder now, professional but firm, "we're finalizing year-end reviews. We need to reconfirm the primary guarantor and controlling party on several family-linked accounts." The room went still. My father frowned. "Family-linked," he repeated, as if the word offended him. I didn't look away from the phone. "Go ahead." There was a soft shuffle of papers on the other end. "To confirm, you are the primary guarantor on the Whitman property line, the revolving credit facility, and the investment-backed accounts opened under your parents' names. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. My mother laughed once, short, brittle. "That can't be right." The voice on the phone continued, unbothered. "Additionally, all approvals were contingent on your financial profile. Without your guarantees, these accounts would not have been approved." I could hear my own heartbeat. Slow. Steady. My father leaned forward. "Who is this?" he demanded. I put the call on speaker. "This is Northbridge Bank," the representative said clearly. "We're speaking with Miss Claire Whitman." My aunt's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. My mother's face drained of color. "There must be a mistake," she said, already shaking her head. "We've banked independently for years. Theramably, unhaldindifive in time." "There must be a mistaking her head. We've banked independently for years." "Not independently," the voice replied. Not without Miss Whitman. Silence swallowed the room. My father opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Are you saying our accounts, our house, were approved because of your daughter's financial standing? The representative finished. Yes. No one spoke. I felt something settle inside me, not triumph, not anger. Just clarity. For the record, the voice added, we also require confirmation that Miss Whitman will continue as guarantor moving forward. I looked around the table. My mother's eyes were wide, fixed on me like she was seeing a stranger. My father's jaw worked soundlessly. My aunt stared at the tablecloth. No one met my gaze. I answered the phone. I'll confirm after the holiday. Understood, the representative said. Thank you, Miss Whitman. The call ended. No applause. No gasps. Just the sound of a clock ticking somewhere behind us. Finally, my father spoke. You never told us. I folded my hands. You never asked. My mother whispered. All this time. Yes, I said. All this time. The word burden hung in the air, suddenly homeless. And in its place stood something far more uncomfortable for them. The truth. The silence didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly, unevenly like ice under too much weight. My mother was the first to speak. Claire, we didn't mean it like that, she said quickly, her voice thinner than before. You know, we were just worried. We didn't have all the information. I almost smiled at the word information, as if respect had simply been delayed by a missing detail. My father cleared his throat. If we'd known, well, things would have been different. Different. Not better. Not fair. Just different. My aunt leaned in, suddenly gentle. You've always been private, she said, as though that explained everything. We couldn't have known how well you were doing. I nodded once. Exactly. That answer unsettled them more than anger would have. Apologies began circling the table, soft and indirect, never landing anywhere solid. We're proud of you. We must have misunderstood. Families make mistakes. No one said, we were wrong. What struck me most wasn't what they said, it was how fast the tone shifted. The same people who had spoken about me minutes earlier were now careful with every word, measuring each sentence as if I might withdraw something invisible but vital. Because now they understood I could. My mother reached for my hand. I let her, but I didn't squeeze back. Her grip lingered, hopeful. I hope you know, she whispered, we never wanted you to feel small. I looked around the table at the lowered eyes, the forced smiles, the sudden politeness. I didn't feel small, I said quietly. I felt erased. No one argued with that. The night continued, but the warmth was gone. Laughter didn't return. Plates were cleared in silence. Every movement felt careful, restrained, like they were afraid of breaking something else. And in a way, they already had. Because apologies, I realized, only matter when they arrive before the truth forces them out. And theirs came too late. I didn't announce my boundaries that night. I didn't need to. The room already knew something had shifted. After dinner, while coats were being gathered and goodbyes rehearsed, my father pulled me aside near the doorway. His voice was low, careful. Claire, we should talk soon. About everything. I met his eyes. We can talk, I said. But some things need to be clear first. He nodded, waiting. I'm not cutting anyone off, I continued. This isn't punishment, but my support, financial or otherwise, is no longer automatic. His expression tightened. You mean time and destinate? I mean, it's not a birthright, I said calmly. It's a choice. And choices require respect. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue. Then he didn't. He simply exhaled. My mother hovered nearby, pretending to straighten scarves that didn't need fixing. We're family, she said softly. Families help each other. They do, I agreed. When there's honesty. When there's dignity. When support isn't used as leverage. She swallowed, understanding exactly what I meant. I wasn't withdrawing out of anger. I wasn't making threats. I was doing something far quieter and far more difficult. I was redefining the terms. For years they'd assumed access to me was guaranteed. That my silence meant consent. That my stability existed for their convenience. That night ended without another argument. No dramatic exits, no slammed doors. Just a mutual realization settling in. Support given without respect becomes entitlement. And entitlement, once corrected, never forgets the moment it lost its power. I left before dessert. Not out of anger, out of clarity. The night air felt colder than when I'd arrived, but it was clean, honest. The kind of cold that wakes you up. As I sat in my car, the glow from my parents' house still flickering behind the curtains, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. I had spent years trying to prove I wasn't a burden to people who needed me to be one. The label had never been about money. It had been about comfort. About control. About needing someone in the family to stand lower so others could feel taller. And I had fit that role too well. I thought about how easily they'd rewritten my silence as weakness. How they'd mistaken privacy for failure. How my independence had unsettled them enough to create a story where I was lacking because that story made them feel secure. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't a burden. I was quiet. And capable. And unwilling to perform my life for approval. That scared them. The bank hadn't given me power that night. It had only revealed what already existed. What I'd built without applause. What I'd protected by staying silent. As I drove away, my phone buzzed once. A message from my mother, "We'll do better." I didn't respond right away. Because doing better isn't a promise, it's a pattern. And patterns take time. What I knew with certainty was this: I no longer needed to be understood to be free. I had chosen boundaries over guilt. Truth over performance. Peace over permission. And for the first time, Christmas felt exactly the way it should have all along. Quiet. If this story resonated with you, I want you to know something. I didn't share it for validation. I shared it for anyone who's ever been quietly labeled a burden simply because they didn't perform their life for others. If you've been there, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think I handled it the right way? Would you have spoken sooner or stayed silent like I did? Your perspective matters, and your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to read tonight. What I learned is this: silence is not weakness, but boundaries are essential. Support should never be assumed, guilt should never be currency, and love should never come with conditions. Financial independence is important, but emotional independence is what truly sets you free. If you believe in choosing dignity over approval, please support this channel. Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts below. Let's build a space where quiet strength is finally respected.